Welcome to Nicki's Crochet Podcast. Here you get to know your designers from a totally different perspective. I am so excited for you to be here. Make sure to subscribe to my channel as well as the guest channel. And today we have a special guest here. And today we have Alex from Two of Wands. I am so excited for you to be here. I've always wanted to chat with you. How are you doing?
Thank you so much. I'm good. I'm calling in from an outdoor cafe park situation because my New York City life is a little dysfunctional and I'm constantly moving from location to location. So this is probably not the typical backdrop you're used to. I watched some of your other videos and everyone has their beautiful craft room with the wall of yarn behind them. This is a little different, but this is true to my typical daily life. So you're getting a very inside perspective here.
Yes, it definitely is all you. It's like when I think of you, I think of New York. I think of pretty pictures, and it's just you're just amazing. I just love everything you do.
Thank you so much. That's so sweet of you.
So let's get right into it. How did you even get into crocheting and knitting, and which one came first? Like, who taught you? Like, give us a gist.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I did study fashion design. My mom is an artist and I grew up making tons of different stuff. She's primarily a painter, but dabbled in all sorts of stuff and a lot of craft oriented things too. So as a kid, I was always making things. It was like my favorite thing to do. And I loved fashion. So I studied costume construction technology. So more of the like hands-on couture techniques of like building clothes with a variety of different materials, as well as fashion design, which was more about the composition of a collection and how to make everything flow and stuff and textiles and things like that. But as soon as I graduated, I ended up working for a nonprofit in New York City. And so for 8 years, I did that. I was the personal assistant to the founder of the nonprofit, and I was also the director of communications and advancement. That was my title there. But around the time I was turning 30 years old, I was really looking for something that would be more kind of creatively fulfilling. I really wanted to get back to those kind of creative fashion roots. And I have always knit and crocheted. I was always knitting, I would say. My mom taught me, my grandmother also knit. And so I grew up kind of knitting very basic things though. Yeah. And I'll get into the way I named my company in a little bit. But it was the year 2013. And I was taking a break from the nonprofit and I was knitting a bunch for the holidays. I always loved to give hand knit gifts. And I had already opened an Etsy shop earlier that year and named it Two of Wands. And I just was like, I didn't even know what I was going to do with that Etsy shop, to be honest. But I thought I'll put a few of these knits in there and see how they do. And it was pretty successful initially. And so I was selling finished pieces. Yeah. But, knitting takes much longer than crochet. So I was like, I need to learn how to crochet so I can make some things faster. So then I got into crochet. I taught myself on a plane ride to Costa Rica. Wow. In I think that same year or early 2014. And then I was doing both and it was successful, but I realized that it was too difficult to make the same thing over and over again and also make that scalable in any way because there's only so many hours in the day that you can make a finished thing. As we all know, they're very time consuming. Yeah. So I had read an Etsy shop, like a featured Etsy shop that was selling patterns. And the girl was talking about how it was this amazing passive income and she was able to travel and stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, maybe I can sell some patterns of my stuff. And initially I was a little bit nervous because you're like, do I really want to give away? I was designing everything I was selling anyway, but I was like, do I want to give the instructions on how to do this? No one's going to buy my finished pieces anymore. But I realized I was two kind of different customers, and someone who's going to buy a finished piece probably would never want to make it themselves and vice versa. So I was doing both for a little while. I was selling finished pieces and selling the patterns for everything, but the designing really took off and I stopped selling finished pieces. So now I only sell patterns.
Very successfully.
And then, it's just grown from there. So it's been almost 10 years. This will be the 9th year I've been doing Two of Wands. So
love it. But tell us about how you got to Two of Wands, because I know that's a very, very interesting story too.
It's a great story, but I always feel a little like self-indulgent when I tell this story because it's very wooey,
That's okay. I like it.
So thank you. So I had turned 30 a friend of mine who's a bit wild was like, I want to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. You have to do it with me. And I had never even been hiking before. Like, I'm from Cincinnati. I'm like a land creature. I don't like things that are adrenaline rushes or anything like that. But I do love to travel. And she told me she had talked to a lot of people who had done it, and it was very easy, just like walking up a hill. And I was like, okay, sure. So I bought some hiking boots. I didn't train for it at all. I just wore my hiking boots to and from, walking to and from work every day for like 6 months. Anyway, the trip was amazing. And I kind of went into it with the intention of, because you have a lot of time in your head during this climb. And I had read a book, someone was like, go into this with some affirmations or like something that you really want to work out, because you're going to be alone in your thoughts for a long time. It's like a 7 to 9 day climb up and down, and you're primarily just walking and thinking. So I went into it with the intention of kind of figuring out what I wanted to do professionally. Like I said, I was working at this nonprofit, which was amazing and very fulfilling in many ways, but it wasn't something that I wanted to be my lifetime career. And I really had to get back to something creative. So it was kind of like saying these mantras and affirmations in my head the whole time I was climbing. And when we got back down, somehow we made it to the summit. When we got back down, there was this amazing British woman staying at our lodge, and she was reading tarot cards, and she offered to read ours. And she was reading my little deck. And I don't really even, to be honest, know that much about tarot. But as she was turning over these cards, she was telling me all these amazing things. And it sounded so intriguing and exciting. And she said, the next card I turn over will kind of dictate the next 6 months of your life and show you the path to achieve all of these other amazing things that I've been talking about. So she turned over the Two of Wands card. And I, of course, didn't know what that meant. But she said, the Two of Wands card is really about having two choices. On the face of the card is a man holding two wands. One is slightly in front of him. One is held closer to his body. And you've got his kingdom behind him and this windy path in front of him. So she said, you have a choice here. You can either stay put in what you're doing. And she said, sometimes this can reflect also like a creative endeavor, because you're either staying put where you are, which is not necessarily bad, but you're just going to stay grounded in that. Or you've got this opportunity to take a path that has more obstacles, but in the end will be more fulfilling. And typically that means making some sort of risky or creative choice, because creativity is kind of risky. You know, it's not super stable. And she said, are you thinking about changing your job? I would take this as a sign you should. So I immediately just opened an Etsy shop and called it Two of Wands. I had no idea what I was going to put into it. And then once I started putting the things in there, I didn't even like relate the two, but so many people wrote me and they were saying, oh, it's amazing that you named it Two of Wands after two knitting needles, as if they're magic wands. And I hadn't even thought about that, but now it feels very serendipitous. And then it all worked out the way it was supposed to, you know? So
I totally thought that too in the beginning.
Story, but that is the truth. That is what happened. So
I totally thought that too in the beginning. I thought really you named it after the knitting needles. I was the same way. I just didn't say anything. I was like, man. And then when I heard the real story, it's like, oh, that is so cool. It has like a double meaning. I really love that.
It does. It worked out well. Yeah.
That is so cool. And then you really transitioned perfectly into this business, and it literally blew up for you. I mean, I don't know if it was instant, but as soon as I saw you, you were there and you were like very successful. And I absolutely love your designs. Like, but let's talk about for a second, because I really love that you are really listening to your audience, and you as a mainly knitter, let's say it that way, because that's how I see you mainly, you still want to put things into crochet, and then vice versa, meaning you make the designs from knitting to crocheting almost look like identical. I mean, that must be a hard thing. Like, how do you do that? I mean, like,
it's tricky, you know. As I said, I think I taught myself crochet because I also was interested in some more structured things. I really love making bags. And bags are hard to make in knitting because they tend to stretch out more. They're a thinner material, and crochet has that beautiful density and that texture to it that really helps them stay more sturdy. And I see them as two totally different things. Granted, there are plenty of designs where you can do something similar in each craft, but really they have such different qualities that they're suited for different things. So I love making blankets in crochet because it's faster, so you can make things much quicker. But for garments, it depends actually. I mean, I do garments in both knitting and crochet. But I think because I do both now, I will get so many people. Anytime I release a knitting pattern, I get so many comments being like, would be nice if this was crochet. And I'm like, yeah, it would be, but it's not. So learn how to knit and vice versa, you know? And I try to accommodate as much as I can. Some things, as I said, translate much easier from one craft to the other, but not always. And when it is easy to do, I always try to do that because obviously I want everyone to be happy, and I want available, but sometimes it's just not feasible. So
Yeah,
I do my
that's true.
best.
That's true.
Yeah.
I just remember that top, like you've been talking about that lately on the Instagram stories, is that top with the lines in the front. I don't even know what it's called, but
Yes.
it's beyond gorgeous. And now it's
Stream.
available
Right.
both knitting and crocheting. And I
Mhm.
just love that. It's so
Yeah.
gorgeous. I mean,
Thank you so much. That was very difficult to figure the crochet version out, but I'm so glad I did because it really, I'm happy that that's available now for people who can't
yeah.
knit. So
Yeah, it was worth it. I know it must have been a lot of, brain headaches on getting to that point, but
yeah,
it's beyond beautiful.
thank
But
you.
your pictures, like, I mean, everything around you is New York, but your boyfriend is the one taking pictures. But I think you started
Yes,
in the beginning taking your own pictures and then it transitioned
that's right.
over. But
Yeah.
because of that transition, tell us, I'm really curious now, are you guiding him on how you want the pictures to be, or is it the other way around? Because he's so good at it, right?
Well, I am a tough client, I will say that. I initially, when I was first starting out, actually the very first two of Juan's photos, when I was making finished
Hmm.
pieces and just transitioning into patterns, those were all taken in Ohio because I was home for a whole month when I launched two of Juan's, and I was like playing with all my mom's art supplies and using her yarn and stuff. So actually, all those pictures were taken in my guest bedroom by my mom against a white wall. And then when I got back to the city and I'm like, ooh, I gotta, I would kind of use a tripod, but it's so hard to see yourself
Yeah.
and know what is, what's happening in front and behind the camera. So a very dear friend of mine, Paige, who is like an amazing model and also
Yeah.
loves all of this stuff too. We both had kind of flexible schedules. So we were hanging out in the city every day, going to cafes and working from there together. And I just started taking pictures of all of the stuff on her. And then I moved to LA for a little bit. I started taking pictures on my friend Christine. But when I came back to New York, they had all moved. So I'm like, well, I need someone to take my pictures. And at this point, Nick was an actor. He was not a photographer at this time. And whenever I would ask him to take photos, they would be like, it's so confusing. Like, I'm asking him to photograph a sweater, but the picture would be like from here, like with
Yeah.
10 feet of air above me. And I'm like, no, the sweater is lower.
Yes.
Learn how to frame. So I like to say that I kind of taught him how to
Yeah.
take photos, but that's not true. All of a sudden, I don't know, he's become a fashion photographer and he's so super talented.
Yeah.
But the process of taking pictures of my stuff isn't probably not his favorite thing to do because usually when he's shooting, he's more about movement and the
Yeah.
cinematography and telling a story. Whereas I'm like, no, I need to get this little detail. And if my hair is covering it at all, like the pictures have to be very specific
Yeah.
to get all of the details of the garment and everything. And I can be kind of tough on him. So every time we have to take a photo of my stuff, he's like, okay, I think has to like psych himself into it. But I've talked to a lot of other friends whose husbands take all of their pictures and they're like, it's the same for us. Like there's like arguments. We get along really well, but I'm definitely hard on him. So I'd say
I,
it's sometimes he'll be like, just let me do it. And then the pictures turn out great. And I'm like, you were right. Now he knows what I need to capture and everything.
yeah.
Beginning, it was a little tricky.
Oh my gosh, I feel like I'm listening to my own story because my husband never knew how to do photography and now I'm teaching him how to
Yes.
do it, and he's like
Amazing.
he has to get himself into an angry mode, and when he's angry he gets the best pictures. I don't know what that is about, but it makes it
Oh,
hard,
that is so funny.
but the pictures
Yeah.
turn out so great. I'm like,
All these guys should be so happy we're like giving them second careers.
I know. I totally agree. Oh my gosh. But how did you end up working so much with Linebread? I mean, Linebread is incredible. I'm amazed. I mean, I love them. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, is it because you're in New York that you work a lot more deeper with them, or how did that actually end up?
Well, they had reached out to me. I think it was in 2016 when they were first, because they have a whole team of like in-house designers and
Yes.
contract designers that they work with.
Yeah.
But those people are really just designing for the Lion Brand website.
Yeah.
And it was in 2016, I think they launched their like outreach to work with indie designers. So they're they're basically commissioning designers with non-exclusive kit rights to kit the pattern, but then the designers can still sell the patterns and have them on our own blogs and everything.
Yeah.
So that was in 2016. They asked me if I wanted to do 3 designs over the course of 3 months. And I said, yes, of course. I mean, Lion Brand is the first yarn I ever used, Willie's Thick and Quick. And, most of the things I was designing and selling were in Lion Brand yarns anyway.
Yeah.
And I love that they're so accessible for
Yeah.
pretty much everyone. They're widely available. They've got a great price point, and there's so many different ranges of yarns that they do. And so, yeah, so of course I said yes. And then that just kind of grew. I had a couple of really successful initial patterns that I did for them. The coffee shop wrap, which is a knit shawl, and the
Mm-hmm.
tea house wrap, which is a crochet version of that. Both did really, really well. And those were two of my
Yeah.
first designs for them. So I think that they were very pleased with that. And they
Yeah.
kept offering me more and more and more. Yes, since I am in New York, I was able to go to their offices all the
Yeah.
time, and I got to know the Blumenthal family, who
Yeah.
owns Lion Brand. It is, a family-run business,
Mm-hmm.
5 or 6 generations now, which I also think is very cool. And
Yes.
then Mark from Lion Brand is like a huge champion of mine, as
Oh,
of any of the bloggers that
yes.
he works with. He's just like such a sweetheart. So yeah, it just really blossomed from there, and I started doing kind of like seasonal reports for them as
Mm-hmm.
well on trends and everything. And so it's grown from, I think for a couple of years I was doing like 6 designs a year for them. Then my contract got moved up, so I was doing 12. Then I started doing seasonal collections as well. Now we've launched 2 yarns together, so it's a great relationship, and I'm very pleased to
I
have
love
that.
it.
They've been so good to me.
I love it. And yes, Mark is such a sweetheart because I message him all the time and I work a little tiny bit with Lion Brand, hoping to expand it, but it's amazing. But let's talk about your
Yeah.
yarns. This was your very
Okay.
first one, Hugh and Me.
Yes.
First of
Yes.
all, did you reach out to them? Or did they reach out to you? How did you come up with the name and the names of the colors? Tell us about the process. How
Mm-hmm.
does this even work? That you're so curious.
Yes. Yeah. So in 2019, Mark had asked several of the bloggers if anyone would be interested in kind of hosting a year-long project that would include a bunch of other designers, and it was called the Traveling Afghan.
Yes.
So I volunteered to be in charge of all of that,
Yeah.
and while I was very like talking to him basically every day, creating the
Yeah.
plans for that, we just really had such a great time working together. And he was like, I had always wanted to do a yarn, and to be
Yeah.
honest, in 2014 I think Etsy launched kind of a crowdfunding beta test for a service that they were trying to do, which basically allowed you to take a bunch of pre-orders so that you could get the money to fund something. And I was part of the beta test, and I actually had a line of yarn produced in upstate New York. It
Cool.
was kind of a fail, but it was this chunky weight
Yeah.
wool acrylic blend, and it was beautiful. And I had always wanted to have my own yarn line. And so when Mark and I were working together and he was saying it would be so fun to do something like this together, I was like, heck yeah. So he kind of proposed it, but
Yeah.
we talked about it more and more. And then we both kind of presented it to the higher ups
Yes.
at Lion Brand. And I think what really sold it was that there was kind of like a gap in the market. There weren't a lot of bulk yarns
Yes.
within their competition and the other brands that are kind of their level. So I am always trying to, as you said, like please my customers and the audience and the community and create things that I think that they would enjoy.
Yeah.
So really, Hue and Me is all about, creating something that is a tool that's useful
Mhm.
for everyone else. And I wanted it to be a range of beautiful colors that would all go together so
Yeah.
that there wouldn't be any second guessing. It would be really easy to choose whatever color palette you would want and create something nice. And I knew that I would want it to launch with a large portion of pattern support so
Yeah.
that people would know exactly what to do with it as well. And they wouldn't feel like they're just buying this yarn to have it sit on their shelf, because we all love having a big yarn stash, but also we want to use those things and
Yeah.
be able to, make an investment to go towards something and not just have it sit on a shelf.
Yeah.
So that was Hue and Me, of course, it launched and ended up launching in 2020 during the
Yeah.
pandemic, and everyone was at home looking for something to do.
Yes.
And I think that helped with its success as well. And when we were talking about Hue and Me, there was also the idea of doing a more spring summer yarn at the
Yeah.
same time.
Yeah.
We ended up pausing that a little bit because, as we all know, with shipping delays and everything, it was really difficult to get that off the ground very quickly. But we had that whole year to plan it because of that, and we listened to the feedback of everyone with Hue and Me, and it was crazy successful. But there were a lot of people requesting something that didn't have wool in it because of allergies.
Yes.
People were requesting a thinner yarn, more like a worsted, so that it
Yeah.
could be used for a variety of different things. And so we took that information and started getting samples and looking at different colors and everything. Then we launched Color Theory, which is the second yarn we did together. Yep. And I'm so proud of that one as well. It's incredibly soft. I tried to take all the feedback we got from Hue and Me and pump it into that one. So they're similar. The color palettes are similar, but they've got a little bit of a different personality. The Color Theory range is a little bit more vibrant. It's kind of more of a perky palette than the Hue and Me one, which is a little bit dustier, a little bit more muted.
Yes.
Both color palettes are definitely subdued a little bit. They're not super bright. And that is partially just because, you know, this is reflective of my style, both of these lines, and I prefer those types of colors. But I also think that they're very fashion forward and classic. So when you're going to make something in one of these colors, it's going to be something that you keep in your closet forever, and you're going to want to wear it over and over again. It's going to go with the rest of the stuff in your closet. I just wanted these yarns to be as useful as possible. So that's another reason that the colors are the way that they are. And again, with Color Theory, launched another 12 free patterns along with that yarn. And of course, I've been designing a bunch more with it. It's been really fun. So I guess that answers your question.
I totally love them. But I'm also curious, how did you guys come up with the name Hue and Me as well as Color Theory? Like, how did that come about?
Yes. Hue and Me was, I forget who came up with that. It was either Kelly, who is the graphic designer, or Regina or Faye, who works in production at Lion Brand. It was such, like, both yarns were such a collaborative effort. I would do Zoom calls with them when I could go into the office because of COVID. I would also go in, and I got to work with so many different members of the Lion Brand team, and they all brought their expertise as well in their different areas. We wanted something, I mean, Lion Brand loves a pun, right? A lot of their yarns have very kind of quirky, punny names to them. And they presented that one to me. I was kind of like, is this cheesy? But actually it works perfectly because Hue and Me, it's about the color palette and about the consumer, about the person's going to be using it. And so I think, and then Color Theory, with Hue and Me, I found that there wasn't too much education that I provided when it came to color coordination and the kind of behind the scenes of why I made certain choices with those colors. So I thought it would be really fun to, with the next one, have little mini lessons and have more education all about how to combine colors, why certain colors go together, the psychology behind it and the emotion behind colors. Course. And so we were playing around with lessons and things like that, and Color Theory just felt like the name of a class you would take. And so I thought that was a really fun name. And so that's how that one came about. And I did, when we launched Color Theory, I wrote a series of blog posts all about color theory, the concept, and how to combine colors and everything like that. So that was really fun.
I love it. I always loved color theories. I mean, like, I had an art class when I was in school. I loved anything colors, like the color wheel and things. And so when you came up with this name, I was like, oh my gosh, like this was perfect for me, you know? And then when I actually received it in the box, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm loving this yarn. I mean, just looking at it and touching it, it's like, it's so soft. The twist was perfect. I felt like it was just, I was always worried about, like, well, not just always, but and you know that as a knitter and crocheter that, you know, for crocheting, you want technically a Z twist, you know, and then the S twist is for knitting. So having yarn that you can use interchangeably without so much of a split, because a lot of people don't understand that split, I was worried about it. But when I looked at it, it was like, is it going to split? And then I tried, and it was like, oh, it works up so perfectly. And it's like that spring with it. So then I designed the bag. I'm not even sure if you saw my bag, the striped tote bag with it. And I think Lion Brand just posted it on their Instagram. It just worked up so perfectly together. It just really works up nicely, and I love it. It's like it's going to be my favorite yarn.
I'm so happy to hear that. I'm so happy to hear that, because that's what I was really trying to create, is something that designers and makers would also enjoy using. And to be honest, I mean, I am, when it comes to acrylic yarns, I don't really like that, like, kind of shiny look to them, which most of them have. So we were trying to create something that felt a little bit more matte, a little bit more like sophisticated, so it looked more expensive than it was too. And everything I've seen anyone make with it just turns out so beautiful. As you said, with because I both knit and crochet, when I was getting
Yes.
all of the samples from the factories, I was testing it in both.
Yes.
And with something like color theory, where the fiber is really smooth, it's kind
Hmm.
of hard to avoid that splitting because you don't have the felting that kind of
Yes.
holds the plies together the way you do with a wool blend.
Yes.
That's why a lot of cotton yarns and bamboo yarns also split very easily.
Yeah.
And a lot of acrylic yarns that are made to kind of mimic a wool have that little kink in the fiber, and
Yeah.
that holds them together too, but this one doesn't. So it was a little tough to find the right spin so that
Yes.
it wouldn't be overspun and it would still have that loft to it and
Yeah.
not be super dense, but
Yeah.
also not split. So I think we found a good happy medium there, and I'm
Yeah.
very pleased to know that you think so too.
I do, and I also feel like it works up elegantly. I feel like no matter what stitch you're going to use, this yarn is going to make it look elegant. So when I did my
Thank
bag, I
you.
was like, oh my gosh, I don't think I've ever made something elegant like this. It never felt elegant like this, until I used this yarn. I know that sounds
That's
really
very sweet.
cheesy, but it really felt like it. I actually, because I look up to you, and I don't know how often I've told you that before, but I do
Thank
look up
you.
to
That's so
you.
sweet.
And when I used this yarn, I felt like, oh, I have a piece of two of one. I actually felt that elegance in me, that you always portray so much. And so it's
You
just
are
perfect.
so sweet. Well, everything looks great on Instagram.
That's true.
Things can be very chaotic behind the scenes. And I look up to so many of the designers in our industry, and I think everyone has really incredible individual qualities
Yeah.
that no one can achieve, everything. I mean, you've been so successful with your blog and your YouTube channel. YouTube and video content is something that I really struggle with creating. And so I totally look up to you for that.
Oh, thank
So
you. I appreciate it.
congratulations.
I love
Of
videos. I
course.
love short little videos. YouTube, I hope I'm going to grow a little bit more. For anyone hearing
Yeah.
this right now, go give me a subscribe. And Alex too.
Yes.
But yeah, I love videos. Videos is something that's just from the beginning on. That's how I literally blew up, was with videos. And I was like, yeah, I might as
Yeah.
well. I was never really good at photos. So I was hoping that we end up with just videos. I'm like, I can do videos. That's fine. Let's just
Well,
do that.
videos are the future and they're such
Yeah.
a great resource for people. So
Yeah, totally.
you've
But
done well.
I'm going to sum it up real quick and ask me one more question here. How do
Sure.
you get inspired when it comes to crocheting? Is it the fashion around you? Does it really come from New York, or do you get your inspiration anywhere? Where do you get your inspiration from?
I think it comes from different places. I spend half my time in the city and half my time in the Catskills upstate. So I have kind of like that earthy mountain
Yeah.
vibe around me a lot as well. Obviously, people watching in New York City there's no shortage of amazing
Yes.
and weird things to see. So definitely I get inspiration from that. I try to follow trends as well. I love to shop. I love to
Yeah.
even just like window shop, walk around New York City,
Yeah.
see what other, things are in style is always inspiring to me. But I would say that really when I'm designing something, I'm thinking about like the place and time where I would want to be and
Yeah.
the feeling I want to have and like what am I wearing in that moment? Like
Hmm.
if I'm really craving a beach vacation, it's like, oh, if I could only be on a beach right now and I'd have some like flowing shawl or something
Yes.
blowing in the wind, and that feeling is really, I think, what inspires me the most. But also sometimes I'll see an amazing stitch and I'm like, I just have to do something with this stitch. So it's going to be like a big piece of fabric, which inevitably is like a scarf or a shawl or something like that. So it can come from different places, I would say.
Yes, for sure. I love it.
Yeah.
And I love your entire package. Like, I hope at some point you're
Thank
going to
you.
write a book about it, because I feel like you have so many stories to tell.
Maybe.
It would be worth it. Maybe have someone else write it for you and you just edit it.
There you go. That sounds better with my schedule.
Yeah, exactly. But I
Yeah.
absolutely love it. Thank you so much for being here. I love your
Thank you
designs.
for
If
having
and
me.
Yes, of course. And if anyone wants any of her designs or the yarn, check it out. There's a link down below that takes you to everything. Everything is listed right there. Thank you so much, Alex.
Thank
It was a
you.
pleasure to have you.
Same.
Okay, everyone.
All
Bye.
right.